Picture a long highway drive. Suddenly, the rhythm of the road is interrupted by a rapid, metallic ticking from beneath the hood. That ticking is the sound of immediate metal-on-metal destruction. Yet even on brand new, perfectly maintained vehicles with full oil pans, engines are violently seizing. Take the Toyota GR86. Owners of this modern sports car reported catastrophic engine failures at extremely low mileage. The failure stemmed directly from a factory error. Robots assembling the engines applied too much RTV silicone sealant to the oil pan. As the engine ran, tiny pieces of this excess silicone broke off and drifted into the oil sump, eventually getting sucked directly into the pickup tube. Once that pickup strainer chokes on the silicone debris, the oil pump draws a vacuum. Within 3.4 seconds, the entire pressurized lubrication system collapses. To understand how this destroys a machine, we have to stop thinking of the internal combustion engine as a solid block of steel and aluminum. It is a fragile ecosystem. Every moving part is entirely suspended on a highly pressurized, constant flow of liquid. When that fluid system fails, the transition from a high-precision machine to a $10,000 paperweight happens in seconds. Maintaining that flow is the difference between a $150 routine service and absolute financial disaster. Most drivers assume the dashboard oil pressure gauge tells them exactly. In reality, that digital readout is a reactive lie. Modern electronic sensors measure the general pressure in the galleries, but they are completely blind to the actual physical state of the bearings. They cannot detect when the microscopic film of oil separating the metal components begins to thin or shear apart. By the time the system registers a pressure drop and illuminates the red warning light on your dash, the worst has happened. Irreversible, catastrophic wear has already taken place inside the engine block. Despite this lag in detection, the automotive industry has actively phased out physical diagnostic tools. In 2002, the BMW E65 became the first luxury sedan to completely remove the physical dipstick. This engineering choice created gauge blindness, turning observant caretakers into passive users who merely wait for a computer to signal a failure. Historically, monitoring oil levels was a matter of extreme strategic importance, requiring direct physical verification. During the German occupation of France in 1940, Citroën engineers working on military transport trucks weaponized this exact vulnerability. They secretly recalibrated the physical dipsticks so they would read full even when the oil sump was dangerously low. The sabotaged trucks predictably seized up under heavy use. Relying entirely on a dashboard light strips you of your diagnostic power in exactly the same way, leaving you waiting for an alarm rather than preventing the destruction. To understand why oil is absolutely critical, look at a crankshaft journal under a microscope. It is not perfectly smooth. The surface is a jagged landscape of microscopic mountain peaks and valleys, known to engineers as asperities. If these two rough metal surfaces were to touch while spinning at 4,000 revolutions per minute, the resulting frictional heat would instantly weld them together. The only physical mechanism preventing this friction is a concept called hydrodynamic lubrication. It functions exactly like a car tire hydroplaning on a wet highway. As the heavy steel shaft spins, it physically drags the surrounding oil into a narrowing gap against the bearing shell. This forces the liquid into an ever-tightening space, creating a wedge that lifts the metal apart. The fluid trap generates immense force. In high-performance engines, this wedge creates a localized high-pressure zone reaching up to 10,000 psi. This visual scale shows the incredibly tight clearances involved. The minimum oil film thickness, or MOFT, can be as thin as 0.5 microns. A single human hair is roughly 50 microns across. The barrier keeping your engine alive is 1/100th the thickness of a hair. The margin for error is absolute. If engine RPM drops too low under high load, or if the oil viscosity cannot handle the temperature, that 0.5 micron gap collapses, and the internal mountains collide. This precise clearance is at the center of a major controversy in the automotive community. Many traditional mechanics argue that modern, ultra-thin 0W20 oils are entirely too watery to protect an engine, claiming they exist primarily to satisfy government fuel economy standards. The engineering reality dictates otherwise. Modern engines are built with exceptionally tight tolerances. They require ultra-thin oil because the fluid must navigate intricate passages and reach those critical clearances instantly upon a cold start. Thick, sluggish oil takes several seconds to reach the top of the engine block. Because the vast majority of all engine wear occurs in those first few unprotected seconds after ignition, rapid flow speed is mandatory. But utilizing ultra-thin oil introduces a hidden vulnerability. While it flows rapidly, it is highly susceptible to mechanical degradation over time. Synthetic oil doesn't chemically age or evaporate in the traditional sense. Instead, it experiences shearing. The immense mechanical forces and sliding action of the steel gears physically chop the long chain oil molecules into fragments. This chart tracks how viscosity breaks down through shearing. Looking directly at the conventional 5W30 row, the fresh oil starts at a viscosity of 10.5 centistokes. After prolonged use, the mechanical chopping permanently reduces it to 8.2. Thick oil provides zero protection if it cannot reach the bearing wedge in time to prevent startup friction. Because ultra-thin oil eventually shears down and loses its load-bearing capacity, frequent oil changes are a non-negotiable law of modern engine maintenance. This brings us to perhaps the deadliest maintenance misconception of all, the idea that if a little oil is good, filling the engine past the maximum line provides a safety buffer. Overfilling alters the physical geometry inside the oil pan. The standing level of the liquid rises so high that it comes into direct contact with the spinning crankshaft above it. Spinning at 3,000 RPM, the crankshaft acts like a giant mechanical egg beater. The heavy counterweights violently strike the surface, rapidly whipping the liquid oil into a thick, aerated white foam. This creates a fatal compressibility paradox. Liquid oil is incompressible. It firmly holds its volume under immense weight, which is exactly how it supports the heavy rotating mass of the engine. Timing, sustained focus. Air, however, is highly compressible. When the spinning shaft drags one of these compressible air bubbles into the 10,000 psi bearing wedge, the extreme localized pressure instantly crushes the bubble down to a microscopic point. The rapid compression of the trapped air triggers a violent chemical reaction. The bubble spontaneously combusts, reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius and leaving behind a thick, black, carbonized residue. Engineers call this microdieseling. Millions of these tiny explosions act like miniature jackhammers, pitting the metal surfaces and turning the remaining oil into a gooey sludge that clogs the narrow fluid passages. Adding extra oil aerates the fluid, introduces explosive air pockets into the clearance apse, destroys the hydrodynamic wedge, and literally melts the bearings from the inside out. Preventing this destruction requires strict adherence to a specific maintenance protocol. For decades, drivers were taught to check their oil on a completely cold engine, but modern fluid dynamics show that habit is mechanically flawed. Step 1 is temperature recovery. The engine block must be warm to ensure the oil is at its operating viscosity, but the ignition must be shut off for exactly 5 to 10 minutes prior to pulling the stick. This wait time allows the thick fluid currently coating the upper camshafts and valve gears to fully drain back down into the sump, revealing the true operational volume in the pan. Step 2 requires understanding the precise geometric calibration of the dipstick. The marked distance between the minimum and maximum lines is an exact volume measurement. On almost every modern passenger vehicle, the space between those two lines represents exactly 1 quart of fluid. Violating this 1 quart margin in either direction guarantees mechanical failure. Dropping below the minimum uncovers the pickup tube during sharp turns, causing instant pump starvation. Going above the maximum line raises the fluid level directly into the crankshaft, triggering aeration and microdieseling. Step 3 moves beyond physical volume and into molecular chemistry. True diagnostic insight requires testing the fluid via used oil analysis, or UOA. By examining a sample under a spectrometer, laboratories detect exact concentrations of heavy metals suspended in the fluid. These trace metals serve as a highly accurate early warning system for internal wear, long before the engine begins to knock. This used oil analysis table shows exactly what to look for. Notice the severe spike in the Cariant Ultra row. An iron reading at 138 parts per million indicates heavy scraping on the cylinder walls. A spike in copper or lead proves the soft outer layers of the main bearings are actively being eaten away. This brings us back to the massive engine failures we examined earlier. The ruined engines in the Toyota GR86 and the Kia Theta 2 were not destroyed by low oil levels. In the Kia's case, metallic swarf from the manufacturing process was left inside the galleries. Whether it is excess factory silicone or leftover metallic shavings, microscopic debris floating in the oil gallery eventually chokes the pump. The internal pressure drops, and the 0.5 micron wedge instantly collapses. The internal combustion engine remains one of the most violent environments ever engineered. As long as we use contained explosions to move across the earth, the manual ritual of checking the oil will remain the single most vital conversation you can have with your machine.